Greetings, booktubers. Welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Welcome to a Sunday Comics edition of Grammaticus Books, where today we're not talking about hidden comic book gems. We're not talking about lost or forgotten comic book gems. Instead, as a part of Sumerian September, probably my last video for Sumerian September, we're talking about Titan Comics' Conan the Barbarian and their adaptation here in issue number 15 of The Frost Giant's Daughter. This is written by Grim Jim Zub over at Titan Comics. The art is by Doug Braithwaite, and the color in here is done by Diego Rodriguez. And I think Diego Rodriguez really deserves a shout out here and a lot of recognition for how well he handles the coloring of the panels in here in order to bring out the panels that need to be brought out in the manner in which they need to be brought out with his colors, and then dimming them down and subduing them where they need to be subdued. I think he really added a lot to the artwork within this issue here, number 15, The Frost Giant's Daughter, Titan Comics' first adaptation of a Robert E. Howard story. Now, when you're adopting The Frost Giant's Daughter, there are, in comic book form, there are two huge hurdles that you have to get over before you can properly adopt this comic, before you can figure out how you're going to do it. And hurdle number one is from a writing perspective, and that it's already been done. It's already been done at least twice, once by Marvel Comics in their original run with Roy Thomas in issue number 16 here, with a fantastic and very faithful adaptation of the story by Robert E. Howard by Roy Thomas, and then done again by Dark Horse Comics, which I'll put up over here. I don't own a copy of that Dark Horse Comics run, which I need to fix that. But Dark Horse did another very faithful adaptation of it that's hailed as a very good adaptation of that comic book that people like quite a bit. So you have to decide, from a writer's perspective, are you just going to follow that same formula? Are you going to follow in those footsteps and just do a faithful adaptation? Or are you going to try to put something new into it? Are you going to try to put your own spin on it? And if so, how are you going to do that without disturbing and altering the events as they're told in the original story by Robert E. Howard, as told here in issue number 2 of the Lance Acer series, Conan of Samaria? So that's the first problem you have to decide how you're going to tackle and overcome. The second problem is the artwork. Because you know, as the artist working on this, that you are going to draw inevitable comparisons to Barry Windsor Smith's just epic rendition here of The Frost Giant's Daughter. I mean, look at that cover, and the entire interior of this comic book is every bit as good as this cover. You've got those shoes to fill. You've got that standard to live up to, which has just got to be daunting. And then Dark Horse Comic did almost as equally good of a job with their artwork. So you've got that hanging over your head when you try to tackle The Frost Giant's Daughter from a comic book perspective. Now, this is actually a 3-issue run. The arc, I should say, of Frost Giant's Daughter is actually a 3-issue arc, starting with issue number 13 by the same crew, Jim Zub, Doug Braithwaite, and Diego Rodriguez. So this is Jim Zub's take on the motivation of Conan here in issue number 13 as to what persuaded Conan to make him leave his native Samaria, travel north into Asgard, and become involved in the events that get him wrapped up in the story of The Frost Giant's Daughter. So that's what you get here in issue number 13. And issue number 14 is Jim Zub giving you the build-up, what happened in order for Conan to meet up with Njord and the Aesir, how he became associated and working with the Aesir and that band of Aesir, and how they wound up in that cross-border raid over into Vanaheim, and that fight with the Vanir, that epic fight that starts off Robert E. Howard's story, the Conan the Barbarian, where it's down to just Heimdall and Conan on the field of battle and the giant northern expanse, which is exactly where we pick up in, let me grab the right comic book here, in issue number 15, where you go right into the story, The Frost Giant's Daughter, where it picks up with Robert E. Howard's story. And it's very well done. It's a decent adaptation of The Frost Giant's Daughter. It starts off with a very grim, very gritty view here by Doug Braithwaite. And then you have the battle between Heimdall and Conan, with Doug Braithwaite's take on the action. And of course, at the end of it, it's just Conan, who's the sole survivor left here in the northern wastes. And there's your splash page. It's decent. I would have liked to have seen Conan a less of a upright and static position in there, but it's not bad at all. And then Atali, the Frost Giant's Daughter, appears. And here's where the coloring by Diego Rodriguez comes in and all of a sudden you have this otherworldly, godly, ethereal coloring that changes the whole tone of the comic book, changes the whole tone of the scene, and it's just excellently done. It's excellently envisioned and then executed by Rodriguez in order to transform the scene and make it a godly looking scene here with Atali, the Frost Giant's daughter. Really well done. And of course, Atali is then taunting Conan in order to lure him up into the north, into the realm of Ymir, her father, the Frost Giant. And at this point, Jim Zub puts his own spin on the comic, and it's a decent spin. What he does is he changes the perspective of who's telling the story of the Frost Giant's daughter. With Robert E. Howard, you get it from Conan's perspective. Here with Jim Zub in issue number 15 of Titan Comics, you get it from the perspective of Atali, the Frost Giant's daughter. And Atali's motivations in this comic book here, as written by Jim Zub, are vastly different from the motivations that are implied here in the story by Robert E. Howard. And here it's strictly bloodlust. She wants to lure warriors such as Conan up into the north in order for her brothers, the Frost Giants, to cut out their hearts and lay them smoking upon her father Ymir's table. In this comic book here by Jim Zub, that's not her motivation. Instead, her motivation is that she wants to lure these warriors up because she wants to use them in order to sate her sexual appetites. She's trying to be the bad daughter. And the appearance of the Frost Giants, here she's luring Conan northward when all of a sudden Ymir intervenes, which is the fiery panels that you get here. The wrath of Ymir, her father. Her father is upset with her, and he sends the Frost Giants to kill these warriors, including Conan, in order to thwart her and preserve her honor, shall we say. So that is the motivation and the change that Jim Zub does in here, and it's really well done. He's changed the perspective. He's added something new to the story that's new and interesting, but he's done it without changing the actual events or outcomes of the story itself. And I've got to give credit to Jim Zub for coming up with that hook, coming up with that new angle in which to tell the story, where he adds something to it without taking anything away at the same time from the original Conan story, from the original Robert E. Howard story. And here you've got this great battle. And I love this rendition here of the Frost Giants. They're drawn here by Jim Braithwaite and colored by Diego Rodriguez. And the exact colors as you would get it from the Dungeons & Dragons Monsters Manual. They have the blue skin and the fiery beards and frost sickles stuck in their hair as you would out of the D&D Monster Manual. I thought that was a good little touch as well. You have the battle. We know how that goes. And then Conan is going to sate his desire that has been stoked by Atali, upon Atali. And again, you've got just the great colors coming in here from Rodriguez, where now he's got the flames coming up, showing the desires and the passions, accenting that part of the story. Just doing a wonderful job on it. I will say right here, I'm not thrilled with that panel by Braithwaite. He has a tendency, I think, sometimes to draw Conan in a very static form. And his renderings of Conan, his stature seems to be not as great as it is told in the stories. Conan's usually the tallest person in the stories, and Braithwaite tends to render him a bit shorter. And in this story in here, Jim Zub intimates that Conan might not be quite as tall as Robert Howard writes him in his stories. I think there needed to be a little bit more action in that one. This is Conan telling her that you cannot escape me, but his posture is very static. I think there could have been a little bit more dynamism to it, a little more bit action, a little bit more passion in his face in order to properly relay that. And then Ymir implores her father to save her, to preserve her honor, to get her out of the clutches of this mere mortal. And her father obliges her, and you get this wonderful panels here. Great artwork by Doug Braithwaite, combined with great coloring by Diego Rodriguez that makes for just some excellent pages. And then you come back to the real world, and suddenly you've got the muted colors of the real world to bring it back into the land of the mortals. It's very nicely done. And then here's Conan. And of course he has the gossamer the gossamer gown in his grasp to prove that it was real, not just a figment of his imagination. Now, I'm going to say something here. I'm going to have a slight criticism of Doug Braithwaite's renderings of Conan. He tends to render Conan, his facial expressions, at least in my opinion. Conan always looks like he just got hit in the head with a heavy object. He looks a bit dazed and confused. In most of the panels where Doug Braithwaite writes, or I should say draws his faces, his facial expressions, like he doesn't quite know what's going on. And I'd like to see maybe a little bit more determinism on his facial expressions. He tends to look a little bit confused and hesitant when he's being drawn by Doug Braithwaite. And that's not just in this comic, it's in all the other comics as well. That's a minor complaint. It's a very minor complaint here that I have, but I would like to see a little bit more of a determined expression, a little bit more of a self-confident expression coming from Conan the Barbarian, rather than looking like he just got hit in the head with a club in most of the panels where he's showing his face. But that's Conan the Barbarian here, issue number 15, The Frost Giant's Daughter, the adaptation by Jim Zub, drawn by Doug Braithwaite with the colors by Rodriguez, and it's well done. It's a solid comic book. I thought they did a good job with it, and I was impressed with Jim Zub's ability to add a new twist to the story and bring a new dimension to it while still preserving all the elements from the original Robert E. Howard story. So well done. I do recommend it. I recommend you go out and buy this comic book and check it out for yourselves. But that's Titan Comics, Conan the Barbarian, The Frost Giant's Daughter. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on it. If you read it, from what you saw of my review, does it look like something that you like? Do you like Jim Zub's adaptation of it? Would you rather have seen it go in a different direction? Put it down in the comments section below. I do read and respond to all the comments. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up and say take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys next time.